Hello, and welcome back to From Hobby to Full-Time, a podcast for personal stylists who want to take their side hustle a lot more seriously. Whether you're starting, growing, or expanding your personal styling business, this is your go-to resource plus accountability circle to get shit done. I'm Sydney. This is my cat, Palma, and I'm a personal stylist and business coach with a different point of view. Here, you'll find tons of practical, real advice with a hefty dose of magic for your entrepreneurial journey. Ready for it? Let's go. All right, guys, welcome back. This is episode 2 in a 3-part series called #The Money Diaries. Today, we are talking about triggers, shame, and guilt. And chances are you have some of these things when it comes to money. So if you haven't already listened to episode 1, go do it now. We get really real down to talking about budgets, debt, prioritizing spending, and giving you real life examples along with a downloadable personal money tracking spreadsheet. I firmly believe that normalizing money is the key to overcoming your triggers, shame, and guilt around money. So first things first, I want to give a disclaimer. Again, this is not a financial advice podcast. I'm not qualified to give financial advice, but I do have stories and experiences that may help you on your financial journey. So if you are about to say that you don't have any money, you don't have any money. That's not what I want to say. Subconscious split thought, though, maybe Freudian slip. If you're about to say you ain't got no problems when it comes to money, then 1, let me congratulate you. And 2, let me tell you to stop lying. Because we all have money issues, whether we realize it or not. And it took me a lot of years to recognize the debilitating fear I had around money, the stories I was telling myself about money, and the beliefs I took on from childhood without even realizing it that were not serving me when it came to money. So I want to talk a little bit about my triggers, shame, and guilt around money. I mentioned this in episode 1, and I promised we would get back to it. So in my family, we were raised to save money. Always spend cash, never have debt. God forbid you lease a car. You work hard and you make your own money. I always had jobs. My first job, I was 15 and I was working at the Yorktown Battlefield Museum. I worked part-time jobs all through college. Even now I have a lot of jobs. There were definitely unconscious beliefs around money, working hard, saving money, spending cash that I took on. And let's be clear, these things are not bad, right? You want to save money. I talk about saving money a lot. I love saving money. And these are good financial sound advice, but they can create money roadblock hurdles and form the basis for triggers that you may face later in life. That is, unless you're a really smart, wise listener and you're tuning in now because you know you have some money guilt, you have some money shame that you're working to overcome. So I want to tell you a story about my leased car. Dun, dun, dun. Think back to where I said, God forbid you ever have a leased car. About 2 years ago, my used, paid for in cash, remember that car envelope savings I had from episode 1? Turns out it's a useful thing. 1998 Toyota Avalon was on its last leg. I wasn't really super safe when I was driving it. The wheels were about wobbly, things were not great with this car. It was on its last leg. And I didn't really want to put a lot of money into it to fix it because it was so old. So I also didn't have, at this point in time, a car stash, a car cash envelope, or money to put down on a used car. So I talked to my accountant because I had an accountant for my business, and I decided that I would lease a car through my business. It made sense for where I was at the time. I was making more than enough money in my business to pay for it. It was helpful in my taxes, and I could use it to just schlep around all of the wardrobe stuff I was doing all of the time working with clients. Now, leasing this car brought up a boatload of money feelings that I didn't even know I had. I felt embarrassment that I would have to tell my family I was leasing a car because I knew that they didn't view that as a sound financial decision. I felt guilt over quote unquote wasting and throwing away money by leasing a car. I had fears that I was no longer financially responsible because of this decision. I was consumed with worry to the point where I tried to find out how I could get out of my lease, which hint, you can't, or you end up paying way more money. I felt fear that I was being someone I was not, that I had this kind of fancy new car with all these bells and whistles and buttons that, let's be real, I didn't even know what they did because my other car was 20 years old when some people couldn't even afford a car. So there was all of these feelings that came up for me in this instant. I had guilt, I had shame, and it was triggered by taking an action that went against a belief that had been ingrained in me as a small child and all throughout my life. And what finally stopped all of this kind of frantic and honestly useless and super negative behavior was when I recognized what was happening and I started to change the story I was telling myself. Now, let me be clear again. I wasn't deluding myself or saying, oh, it's okay that you're leasing a car because X, Y, and Z. I wasn't trying to convince myself it was okay. I was looking at facts. I was changing the story. One, I am financially responsible still. I make enough money and have made my car payments. Leasing a car through a business is not a bad financial idea. In fact, sometimes when you have a business, it is better to lease a car. This doesn't mean leasing a car personally is always good, but sometimes in a business aspect, and for me, it was fine. I'm going to purchase a car when my lease is up. Could I have saved more money if I bought a used car? Sure. But I also plan on driving this car until it is dead. So in this instance, buying a newer car that's going to have some better features to it makes sense now than buying an even older car and then maybe having that not last as long as I would want. So when I started to work through these things and I started to rewrite, another key is I'm still the same person as when I drive a 98 Avalon or a 2018 Outback. I don't put a lot of stock in cars per se, but that said, I do also love how I feel when I drive the Outback, but I would never go into debt over it. I would never make bad personal decisions over something like that. So when I was able to rewrite these stories, however, I was able to find peace in my decision. And it has taken me almost the length of my 2-year lease to really recognize, work through, and come to terms with some of the guilt and shame and fear that I've had around this particular instance of money. What am I going to say? Sorry, I'm looking at my notes and falling off of, and my cats are fighting in the background. So okay, here we go. I'm telling you this story because like I said, this was a huge, huge trigger for me, but I was able to use it as a chance for me to explore all of shame and guilt and fear around money. I probably could have, if I thought about it, purchased a used car a couple years ago, but then I never would have gotten to explore this and learn these lessons around this particular avenue of money. And so for that, I am grateful. So one of the things I would say is that if you are having fearful or anxiety or anything that's bringing up something negative for you around money, try to be grateful for that situation and know that you're learning something from it that you can use to make better decisions in the future. And you can start to rewrite your negative money stories in your head. So everyone's guilt around money is going to be different, right? But it's also way more similar than we think. So you may have your own car lease story and experience around money that has allowed you to explore these triggers, the guilt and shame, and hopefully work through them. And if not, start to work through them so that you can become and have this image of yourself as a financially responsible person. So other triggers could include debt. It could actually include making more money than your peers or more money than a spouse or a partner. It could be around buying fancy new items and spending a lot of money on things. It could be not able to pay a bill on time, or borrowing money from friends and family, or lending money to friends and family, not being able to go out to eat due to a budget, living paycheck to paycheck. Every stage, my cat just zoomed across the table, across your life is going to bring up money triggers, and it's going to be a chance for you to recognize them and work through them. I have a resource that I love that I will share with you at the end of this podcast. In this book, the author asks to say, you know, if you want to worry about money by all means, worry about it, but only do it for, I think it was maybe 15 minutes a day. Because by the very fact of you sitting and worrying all day long about money, which is what I used to do, the worry and fear and anxiety around money used to be a constant just soundtrack in my head of, would I have enough? Where is it going? How am I spending it? When am I going to get paid? What if I get this bill? You are actually perpetuating and making it a self-fulfilling prophecy, and or you are wasting valuable mental energy. That was the main thing that stuck out to me. I had another coach, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit in episode 3, I believe, that just prompted a question of, what good is your worrying done? We'll explore that more, but it's something for you to think through as you explore your own shame and guilt and triggers around money. What good is having this guilt and shame? How can you change that? How can you move forward to remove that and do something a little bit differently? So there's no shortcut, I don't believe, to getting rid of your triggers around money, but there are 5 things that I have done that have helped me that I would like to share with you. So the first thing is to get practical with your money, right? To normalize your money. And we talk about this all in episode 1. This is so important because you want to kind of build a relationship with money. You want to be familiar with it. You don't want it to be a panic-inducing thing when you go to check into your bank accounts. So in order to reduce that, you need to start doing it on a more weekly, regimented, scheduled basis and get familiar and acquainted with it. 2, have fun paying your bills. Be grateful. Bless your money as it goes out and celebrate it when it comes in. This isn't a practice that I do a lot, but it is a practice that I have done in the past, and I do enjoy doing it. I love being able to say, hey, here is a check for this. Here is, me paying my credit card bill and all those Amazon purchases I bought. And, oh, money's coming to me. I'm so blessed. Thank you so much for this money that's coming in. It allows me to donate to charity. It allows me to do all of these things. A lot of times we just get money and we hate paying bills. We need to change our mindset around that. And a way to do that is to go back to number 1, normalize money. Number 3, make smart decisions. The very best way to not freak out or stress out about money is to make decisions and live within whatever means are available to you. Sometimes that may not be fun. It may not be fun until you are able to normalize some of your spending habits and practices and all of those things. But the more that you can make smart decisions, spend the money you know you have, the less stressed you will be about it and the less chance there will be to have shame and triggers around that. Number 4 is to own your money. And essentially that means to celebrate it. And if you have money or you want to make a splurge, be okay with that, right? I had to eventually own the fact that I leased a car and to become okay with that. And when I was able to do that, it flipped how I felt about it. And I was able to work through some of that guilt and shame that I had felt. And finally, 5 is to actively work to recognize what it is about money that is making you stressed. How can you rewrite those stories and what can you do differently? Rewriting stories may come across as a little vague. I'm going to share some resources, and these people kind of talk a little bit about money stories and how you can start to rewrite them. So I will point you into that direction. But it is important to know that not every belief that has been ingrained in us is may not be true for you. So what that means is, for example, I was taught to believe that car leases were bad. That's not a black and white thing, right? Not in every situation for every person, that's not the best financial decision. But for some people, in some situations, it's a good financial decision. So some of these beliefs are not black and white, and we are taught that they are black and white. Some of them are, it's good to save, it's good to invest. But working through what is going to be good for you and making sound financial decisions is an important part of rewriting those stories. So I had a few questions from Instagram that I wanted to take time to answer, and then I'm going to share some resources with you. So one of the main questions was, how do you deal with triggers, shame, and guilt around money? And that's essentially what this whole podcast is talking about. But to summarize, I work to recognize them. I do my work around them, and then I try to peel them apart layer by layer, year after year. There's always going to be a new money issue to work through. And the important piece is, I think for me, recognizing that and asking myself questions. Why am I feeling like this? Was this a belief from childhood? Is this true? Is this not true? And that has been very helpful. So the second question that I received was, how do I deal with people wanting to go out to eat when I can't afford it? That's a very real thing, right? So it's a tough one, and it can be chock full of triggers. There can be shame, there can be embarrassment, there can be guilt, sadness, all sorts of things. Here's how I would deal with this scenario. I would respond and say, I'm not choosing to spend my money on eating out right now. Can we bring our own food? Or can we hang out at my apartment or house? Or can we get coffee versus drinks? Can we do something that's cheaper? The best way to remove any potential embarrassment is to own your decisions. If you can confidently say, this is how I'm choosing to spend my money, one, it empowers you to come from an abundance mindset and to not come from scarcity, to say, oh, I can't afford it, right? When you say I can't afford it, then you feel bad, like you feel sucky, and like you want to hang out with your friends and you think they're going to think down on you. But if you can flip that script and say, I'm choosing to save my money, or I'm choosing to not spend my money in that way, it's putting you in charge of your money and not your money in charge of you. And hopefully your friends will respect you for that. And if not, that may be something that maybe you need to have a conversation with them, or maybe you need to remove from that particular relationship if they aren't going to respect you. And you might still have to do some work around whatever feelings that brings up. But I hope that by giving that statement to you, that is a helpful way to deal with it. You may definitely still experience pushback, and you may have to just stand your ground on that. Okay. Resources that I want to share. So these are a mix of podcasts and books, things that I personally listen to and have read and love and have found very, very helpful. So the first place I want to point you is Jen Sincero's book, You Are a Badass at Making Money. She breaks this down from a kind of manifestation, law of attraction, but it's a very simple way. And she talks a lot about working through your money issues. So she has exercises after each chapter. I have read this book probably 5 times and have worked through the exercises probably 3 or 4 times. They're really, really good. And I find a lot of times with some of this money stuff, you need to just repeat it, right? There are stories and there's fears, and the guilt and the shame and the triggers are really, really deeply embedded in your subconscious. And you need to constantly have some repetition of alternative ways of doing things and some exercises to pull yourself out of that, to start to believe a different way. Second, I really love Catherine Zinkina. She does the Manifestation Babe podcast. She has a course around money. Again, this is more from that kind of manifestation, law of attraction route, but there are also very practical things in there that are helpful that I think you will enjoy. I love the James Wedmore Mind Your Business podcast. This marries business with a little bit of the woo as well, but a lot of practical things for business owners specifically. Jim Fortin has an amazing podcast. He's the coach I mentioned that we'll talk more about in episode 3. Profit First is a really great book. I have not read the entire book, but I'm very familiar with the system. Is a little bit about envelope systems, but for businesses. So that's great if you are in a business and you want to really start paying yourself and being able to pay for things in the business. Dave Ramsey is a great financial advisor. I know a lot of people that have used his method specifically to get out of debt. So you can look at that. I believe he is very faith-based Christianity. So if that's not your route, maybe not, or maybe take what you can use and leave the rest. I would also say turn to smart friends and family. And when I say smart friends and family, you want to have evidence that these people have good savings accounts, have good spending patterns. They're not living in a way you don't want to live with your money. But they could be very helpful. They may know more than you, and they can help point you in the right direction. And lastly, I would say use an accountant. Honest to God, accountant, CPA, a money person who can give you good advice. This is for your personal and or your business, because they're just going to know things that you don't know. Now, they are not a financial planner, which actually should be a resource on my list, either a financial planner or looking into investments or finding investment blogs that may be helpful. Use Google. Use Google as your next best resource to start to dive into these things. And again, the more you normalize money, the more you make it a part of your regular day, the more you can help eliminate those shame, triggers, and guilt that you feel around this topic. So thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of From Hobby to Full Time. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you have questions, please send them my way. I will do my best to answer them. And stay tuned for episode 3 coming at you in a week. Bye. Ooh, gotta stop it.